Hello and welcome back to the Stubborn Book Podcast. This is Bernadette, and Chapter 5 is here. This is Episode 7. Now, this is possibly the chapter that is the most jam-packed with ideas and advice that you will probably want to listen to it more than once. If succession is important to you, make sure you listen closely and make notes. So, let's have a listen.
Chapter 5. Health. Everyone's long-term health. A successful succession.
I have a 36-year-old friend named Molly who had been in a relationship with her boyfriend Jack for 8 years, and for the past 7 years they shared a house together. The house was in Jack's name, who had bought it 2 years before they started dating, but they split the mortgage and all household expenses evenly. Over the last 5 years, her father started to question why Jack hadn't produced an engagement ring. Initially he liked Jack, but he was starting to question if this young man was just using his daughter, or if he had honorable intentions. Jack started to joke to friends when he was pressed on this matter. Why buy the cow when the milk is free? When Molly's dad heard rumors of Jack saying that, it was a red flag for narcissism, and evidence that maybe the parents actually had legitimate concerns about their daughter's well-being both financially and emotionally. Over the last 3 years, they started to notice Molly's frustration, confusion, depressive moods, and anxiety about the future. Molly was annoyed because she had put a lot of time into the relationship, hoping it would get more serious, but it hadn't. After 5 years of hinting at a ring, it felt like it would never happen. With that, the motivation and effort she had brought to the relationship in the early stages began to dwindle as time went on. After 2 years of putting the pressure on, Jack's lack of commitment made Molly doubt herself and her abilities, and even doubt they had a relationship at all. She came into the relationship believing there would eventually be a concrete commitment, and with it not happening, she found herself spiraling into depression. She wondered why Jack wouldn't commit, and what it meant for them, her future family, and the future she hoped to have. And then, as he kept avoiding the subject, resentment and anger started to build up, and eventually a complete lack of trust developed. If you were Molly or her parents, would you have similar concerns or feelings? I know I would. Now, take those same concerns and put them into a whole different context. Let's say the context of a son or daughter who has been working on the farm or in the family business for over 10 years, where there is no succession plan, and the parents refuse to discuss it. Molly's concerns are exactly their concerns: a failure to commit to the relationship. This uncertain future for successors of a family business is causing a multitude of problems in the business, in their personal family lives, and in their emotional and mental health. More than 75% of family farms do not have a succession plan, and it's a very similar statistic for most family businesses in most industries. For a lot of sons and daughters, this leaves a lot of successors feeling that they are walking on quicksand because they are uncertain what the future of the business is for them and what their stake in the business looks like. For a lot of families, bringing up the topic of succession planning is an explosive topic, and family tensions get worse around this discussion the closer a patriarch or matriarch is to death's door. There are a lot of farms where the son or daughter have worked on the farm and tripled its size over 30 years, only to have their parents divide the business's assets equally, or nearly equally, between farming and non-farming siblings. Many successors were informally told by their father that if you work here, the farm will someday be yours. It is never as clear-cut as that. Like Molly, you can't live with just a pinky swear as a form of commitment. You need a ring on your finger and paperwork signed. This uncertainty is causing a lot of tension within farming households and is a leading factor in the skyrocketing divorce rate for family-owned business owners. Early on in my career, I was in a tense family meeting and saw a wife angrily yell this to her husband in front of her in-laws in the midst of a family mediation.
You are 37 years old and have been working for pennies for your father for over 15 years. With the amount you work, you could have been making over $100,000 a year for the last decade, working in a career off the farm. But instead, you have only been paid $44,000 and worked twice as many hours. We live in a house and drive a truck owned by the corporation. We have no assets outside of this farm. Your dad had cancer when you were 22, and that is why you didn't finish your tool and dye apprenticeship. If you didn't help your dad for those years that he was feeling sick, he would have been forced to retire and the cows would have been sold. You've tripled the farm's land base over the last 15 long years. Land values have tripled over that time. Yet, when has your dad ever said that you've done a good job? Huh? Tell me. You constantly complain about his lack of appreciation and respect for what you've done around here. Why are you still putting up with this? Your dad refuses to do succession planning and refuses to show you his will. I'm guessing he doesn't even have one, and is afraid to accept the fact that someday he is going to die. You have 3 siblings, and they all expect to get an equal share of the business, despite the fact that your siblings haven't put in an honest day's work on the farm since they were teenagers. Your mom says that if she gets the farm, that it is all being split up between the siblings. I love you, and you are the most common sense man I know, but this is freaking crazy. Why should we wait until you are 55 for your mom to pass and find out that we have to borrow money to buy your sister's shares out of the business? With the inflation on land values, there is no way the farm can cash flow buying your sister out and taking on that debt. It isn't realistic to burden our kids over 30 years with that debt. We'd be screwing over their futures by agreeing to this. Why should we have to work every Sunday to milk these cows if your sister Jenny hasn't set foot in that barn over the last 20 years? Why should we make sacrifices today for her to be able to buy a luxury cruise in a decade? I love you, but if we don't have a succession plan by Christmas, I'm leaving this farm, and you can either come with me or not.
For farmers, everything that they love, ranging from their marriage, relationships with their kids, their parents, their career, and even having a home to live in is uncertain because there is no succession plan. This creates the inability to do any type of business planning because nobody knows the future. It makes it nearly impossible to get out of bed in the morning to go fix a combine if you don't know if you'll have to be buying that same combine at an estate sale. In our society, we spend a lot of time talking about the spin-off effects of emotional or mental health, ranging from depression to alcoholism to spousal abuse. But what about the actual culprits? What about the frustrations of working in a dysfunctional family business? What about the feeling of quicksand under our feet because there's no plan for the future? Dysfunctional business succession is an undiagnosed cancer that creates many evils. Even a decade after a messy estate planning battle has been settled, a farmer might hang himself because when you delve into it, the estate plan had too high of a payout to non-farming siblings, and in tight times, the farm can't realistically cash flow the debt obligations the farmer is burdened with. I need to repeat here, farmers have the highest suicide rate, even higher than war veterans with PTSD who have returned from Iraq and Afghanistan. How messed up is that? USDA and extension agents will go around the countryside making speeches about agriculture's big mental health crisis, because farmers are stressed by the challenges of unpredictable weather and commodity markets. But the real anxiety most farmers face is the uncertainty of what their stake is in the business they are investing their lives in building.
Transparency makes the future more certain.
Think about this. If you went off to a software company and you worked there 60 hours a week for 3 years and had good performance evaluations, that company would give you a stock option plan. That's because they want to keep good managers around, hopefully for the life of the company, and give them the opportunity to grow with it. We need this in agriculture up front, not waiting until the son or daughter are in their 40s and have compensation based on entitlement. To have a motivated individual, they need to believe they are earning their future. Sitting around and waiting for someone to die, saying in a will, "I love you more, so here is more capital," is the breeding grounds for both a dysfunctional business and a miserable family Christmas. There needs to be a clear-cut path for a fair business partnership whereby the successor knows that if they work hard to build the value of a company, they will be fairly compensated for their efforts and sacrifices in the end. As the successor works more hours in the business, they should fairly earn more shares in the business. Instead of being focused on splitting the pie, your successor should be focused on growing the business. As they increase the size of the pie, a portion of that capital should be theirs not out of entitlement, but because they earned it. As the size of the pie increases, it also benefits the elder shareholders because they get a slice of the growth. The same as a startup entrepreneur benefits from giving options to managers who increase her share price over a decade. Thus, there is more for everyone to eat because of business growth. Instead of fighting over shares, we should be focusing on sharing in a way that's fair to everyone involved. Steve Jobs would still be operating out of his garage if he simply paid his managers a salary. For some reason, the principles of capitalism aren't being applied to family-owned businesses like family farms, and it's creating a communist mindset in how successors operate day to day. How can you not expect someone to not act entitled if that is the business model? Never forget the principles of capitalism. American agriculture was proven to be 10 times more effective than communist Russian agriculture systems back in the 1970s because farmers owned a stake in the business and cared about results. However, because succession planning is being delayed by 20 years due to modern farmer longevity, it's screwing up the mindset of the next generation of managers who are now no longer willing to make sacrifices for 2 more decades until mom and dad both pass away. Today's young farmers are tempted to adopt an entitled, union workers mindset. Successful startup businesses issue stock to managers early so that their future managers act like owners early in the game, not just overpaid employees with an entitled, Marxist attitude. If you have a son or daughter who act as employees for 20 years saying, "Once I get more ownership, then I'll change my performance," they won't. Bad habits and incorrect belief systems are formed over time and hard to change. This is why tech companies issue stock option plans as soon as possible, once potential managers have proven themselves, and why we see these companies realize high rates of growth and success. Like an employee getting a stock option plan, your family needs to have a simple 2-page agreement about how, if successors work on growing the business over the next 30 years, they are going to earn a growing percentage of the company's shares in proportion to their effort. It needs to be spelled out. It needs to be clear and transparent. Kill the uncertainty by making the future certain. If I work more hours than my sibling, how am I going to earn more? Yes, there are tax issues with a stock option plan instead of just being gifted equity in a will, but they can be worked around by any accountant worth his salt, even if it means issuing non-voting shares which become voting stock after a parent's funeral. The main thing is to have a written understanding in principle between all family members that is transparent with both non-farming and farming siblings. If daughter Mary works in this business, what percentage of the business is she entitled to in her inheritance, and what percentage is she earning because she is working inside of the business to grow and expand it? What happens if she works twice as many hours as her brother Joseph to grow the company? How is this contribution fairly and objectively measured?
Trusting the successor makes the future more certain.
Now let's address the other half of the succession equation. Yes, successors deserve a fair and transparent plan for their future, but so do mom and dad, who, in their right mind, would hand over their entire life savings and legacy to someone they can't trust. They have spent their lifetime building and growing the business, with a substantial amount of their capital, if not all of it, still tied up in the assets of the business. There is no way that their lifetime savings should be handed over to someone they feel is not competent. Successors must first prove themselves to be worthy of being a steward of the family's wealth that took generations to build up. They shouldn't become a partner involved in the management of the business unless they have first proven themselves to be a partner who any non-relative would hire. You must first prove to your family that they are lucky to have you, not that you are in the lucky sperm club, and you are only getting this opportunity because you are lucky enough to be born into this family. Just like it's not common sense to get married on a first date, I don't think that it makes sense to draft a partnership agreement or produce an option plan for a successor in their first year in the business. The average couple dates for about 30 months or just over 2.5 years before engagement. Like dating, I think that is a reasonable time frame for a probationary period for a son or daughter or in-law to work for a business to see if the son or daughter enjoys the nature of the business and has the work ethic and skills to be partnership material. My rule of thumb is 9,000 paid hours, which usually looks like 3 years after they graduate college. Like being tested to see if you are this tall to get on the ride, to become a family business partner, a spouse, a son, or a daughter needs to be evaluated to see if they are marriage material for the business. Would they be a partner and friend anyone would want to work with over 30 years or not? Just like dating, you should have strict criteria for whether your family member would make a good business partner or not. For me, I think the litmus test is in 4 questions that follow the same process this book outlines. Let me list them here. Head. Can I make decisions with this person? Or is it always going to be a head-butting contest? Heart. Are they narcissistic and do they care about the well-being of everyone? Hands. Are they pointing fingers or trying to self-improve the faults that they have? Health. Are they focused on instant gratification or making disciplined decisions for the long-term good of the family? In 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years' time, you can think of the 4H analogy, head, heart, hands, and health, to recall and pose these questions to not only your partners, but yourself. Are you being the partner or friend anyone would want to be partnered with? 4H is not about the kid being perfect and winning trophies on their first day. It's about the process of self-improvement. No boyfriend or girlfriend is perfect, and everyone needs work. It's the same with family-owned businesses. All parents at one time or another will have fleeting thoughts of, why can't he be more like that guy or she be more like her? Being ungrateful for what you were blessed with because of some bad days will blind you to the good days and to the potential that they have. It is important to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and to give a person time to personally grow and improve themselves. During a 3-year period of a family, using the processes outlined within this book, both parents and successors should easily be able to answer those 4 questions posed above. If they are not marriage material, then just like a romantic relationship, it is important to break up civilly, yet still be friends. Just like dating, it's a lot less messy to stop working with a family member as a business partner after just a few years, rather than after a full decade when the relationship is not working out.
You're fired, at least for now.
Through this process, you might have to fire a son or a daughter, permanently or temporarily. If in the performance review process, parents write down that the successor is to show up to work at no later than 5 a.m. to milk cows, and they disrespect this feedback, showing up whenever they want, you might have to fire them. Your family must be firm in your expectation to seek continuous improvement, or they will never become the successors that you can trust to manage your family's investments. You must prioritize killing any sense of entitlement. Entitlement is a hard nut to crack. This may look like a period of several years working someplace else. Many times, a strong sense of entitlement can't be broken if left within the environment that it grew out of. Working someplace else, living someplace else, and having no benefits from the farm can bring a needed reality check. The experience of a son or daughter having to go work somewhere else for 2 years will often give them the mindset changes and experiences that will enable them to be successful in the long term in a way your family can't teach them. Yes, it might be inconvenient to have to hire 2 employees to replace what your daughter is already trained to do, but if you don't do this, then she'll always be doing a half-assed job and your empire will eventually implode. When your son or daughter does come back, they will need to understand that the performance review process is still on the table. The same 4 acid test questions mentioned in this chapter need to be answered before any succession talk or stock option plan can be made. If they haven't learned to self-improve based on their performance review process, firing them again is still an option, permanently or temporarily. This cycle might have to be done several times until the successor has matured enough to become a partner. It might be a decade until you have a worthy successor, but then you'll have a worthy successor.
Quitting is also an option.
Equally, a son or daughter might have to quit if a parent or sibling fails to continuously improve themselves. If the farm is the center of their identity, this might be the toughest thing they have to do in their life. However, if the business's culture continues to enable entitled and narcissistic attitudes whereby partners do whatever feels good and whatever they want, it is going to create a living hell nobody wants to be part of in the long term. If your family uses the process outlined in this book, then why a family member quits is not a mystery but rather clearly validated. Those partners who refuse to self-improve won't invent their own reasons and rationalize excuses. They know objectively how they messed up and what they have to do to fix the relationship. Those certain habit changes that never happen make it clear that a potential partner was not serious about being a partner anyone would want to work with. The onus then falls on them to apologize and change their behavior. If they choose not to, would they ever have been a partner you'd want to work with?
Fear of losing control.
As stated at the beginning of this book, working with parents is no longer a 5-year apprenticeship, but it's often a 20-plus year partnership, because parents are living longer. The period that you are in a partnership with your family isn't like a high school fling. It is a long-term marriage. Parents need to stop saying, "I'm going to retire in 5 years," because it's likely a lie. They might even believe it when they say it, but 90% of the time this never happens because secretly most successful businessmen and women enjoy the challenges of work. You might want to be able to get away for longer vacations, and more often, but you still need a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Most family business owners want to stay in the game and not die depressed and without anything to do except watch Fox News for 12 hours a day on the couch. We need to recognize that we are in a long-term partnership. I understand many parents are afraid to issue stock in a company for fear of losing majority control of the company. This can easily be overcome by issuing non-voting shares that convert to voting stock after someone's funeral. However, the bigger issue that is emphasized throughout this book is that your family needs to build relationships whereby it doesn't matter who owns more shares on a piece of paper in your farm's office safe. What matters is that the right decisions get made and that everyone's viewpoint counts regardless of percentage of stock ownership. What should matter is your faith that the right decisions get made, not an obsession with always having to be right. Instead of running the business based on fear of losing control, your family needs to become obsessed with being able to make quality decisions together as a team and building the successor's character by getting rid of narcissistic mindsets so that you can trust them to always do what is good for the family. If you do this, then Grandpa's advice is always going to be wanted by successors when making business decisions, regardless of what percentage of the company's ownership he has. Only 23% of family farms have a succession plan, but what few lawyers will openly admit to is that the vast majority of these cases are actually hostile takeovers that are window-dressed as succession plans. Ask any lawyer. The dark side of succession planning is that of the 23% of family businesses that do get a succession deal papered, most succession deals resemble stealing Dad's car at gunpoint rather than passing over the keys to the car at prom. If that is the case, then most business owners do not feel welcome on the farm and are definitely not involved in business decisions once the ink is dry on these deals. By first learning to listen to each other and everyone being a better version of themselves prior to the talk, you are going to be welcome on the farm and your input will be wanted. This is regardless of what percentage of the company's stock you own. You're not going to feel like a backseat driver or fighting over the steering wheel for control. The importance or value of this is hard to quantify, but let me ask you this. Do you think the patriarch in your family wants to die wearing a pair of slippers and sitting in a lazy boy couch or die with his work boots on? Even if he is feeble, wouldn't it mean a lot to him for his opinion to be respected and for him to feel part of the business until the day he dies, instead of feeling pushed out? How much is that worth to a proud patriarch in the big picture of things?
When it's time for the talk.
After the potential successor has worked on their family's farm for 3 years and went through the performance review process successfully, the successor has earned the time for the talk to happen. This talk about long-term plans may or may not be what he or she hoped or expected. More than once, I have seen terms that were laid out that the successor could not agree with. For instance, parents might expect the successor to pay out non-farming siblings, pay heavily to charities, or just buy mom's dream home in Hawaii at a rate that the successor doesn't think is realistic. This is better to know now than 20 years from now. There are a lot of farmers who are forced into succession deals where they must buy out parents and siblings at rates that the farm can't cash flow. And then a decade later, when the farm goes bankrupt, they bear the shame of the empire failing, when in fact, it was the unrealistic estate plan's fault. If it's a bad deal that isn't going to result in your grandchildren farming someday, then it's better to walk away after only investing 3 years into the business than after 30 years of indentured servitude. It's better to walk away early than have the eventual shame of losing a family business that took generations to build. Not everyone who gets issued a stock option plan at a company that they worked at for 3 years chooses to take that plan and earn those shares under those terms for the next 20 years. During this discussion, if it is found that no one can agree with what they think is fair, then move on to the next career. The son or daughter can look at their time on the farm or family business as a step in their career and just look back saying, I love my family, but we found out over the 3 years I worked there that we just wouldn't be good partners together. This is a practical way that you can have family Christmas together if working together doesn't work out. As a guy who doesn't get together with his dad for Christmas because of the unexpected dysfunction that nobody could have predicted, I cannot explain to you how much I wish I could have a do-over.
Over 30 and still no plan.
So how does this 3-year performance review apply to families where the successor has been involved in the business for over a decade? This lack of a plan, as discussed at the beginning of this chapter, is a huge problem that causes a multitude of frustrations and dysfunctional partnerships. It has many times destroyed families and farms. When working with farm families who are in desperate need of a plan, I am adamant at making sure to apply the same principles within this book first, usually over 2 years. During these 2 years, the family works on 3 of the 4 H's as listed. Head, improving the family's ability to make decisions together as a team. Heart, improving the business culture so that everyone has a team player, not narcissist, mentality. Hands, evolving everyone's character so that they become the partner and friend anyone can work with. Once you've dealt with these 3, Then you can deal with the last H, health or long-term longevity issues of the farm by addressing your family succession strategy. If there is an emergency issue like grandpa having cancer, you might have to fast-track the talk at 6 months into using this process instead of 24 months, but I would try to stick to this process as much as possible. You need to learn to listen to each other better first. By addressing the head, heart, and hand aspect of the 4-H analogy first, the health of the family business conversation will be easier. Then when your family first has the talk, this meeting is a pleasant 3-hour conversation which turns into a signed agreement and pleasant working relationship going forward instead of a negative interaction, which turns into World War III within your family over the next decade. You've got to fix the stubborn first.